It's the 20th of April 2022. I'm Dana Durnford. I hope you're doing well. And you can call in at 709-589-4406 to the Nuclear Scumbag Show. It's a show about nuclear, and we've been doing it for many years. And what we've discovered, unfortunately, every story that you will read about nuclear in mainstream media is full of propaganda. The story is meant to deceive you, manipulate you on purpose. We don't know how long this has been going on, but we assume it's been going on for history, because as you go back to the archives, you see the same thing. If that doesn't concern you, you might want to ask yourself, what other subjects are you doing the exact same thing in? And then you need to ask yourself, what are the repercussions for telling lies in order to manipulate the consensus worldwide? I think it's astounding that is happening, and we can prove it because we do this typically 5 days a week if we're not on research trips and expeditions. We'll cover the news cycle, and if we cover the stories, because it's full of lies, blatant lies, by professors and academics and scientists and journalists. And you lose faith in the world when you start being exposed to this constantly. And we push back against these lies. But millions of people make a living by telling the lies. They went and got the education, the degrees, so they can tell the lie, and it's hard to argue with somebody with so many degrees. Why would they lie? They got all kinds of degrees, is what I hear all the time. And but that's their job. That's the point of getting the degree, was to be a public figure who told lies, because that's the system. The hidden system of reality is you have no media. It's controlled opposition, and it's used to bludgeon opposition, and it's used to destroy the liberties and freedoms of your future, your children's future, your loved ones' futures and presents, and all species, all 8 million species. We'll just go right into it again here, because it never stops with this lot, does it? The IAEA, which is these people, these creatures. They're not people, obviously. They look like people, but Raphael Grossi is not a human like us. He doesn't covet the same things that humans covet. And it's been rumored that he will sniff bicycle seats. And that's an easy rumor to believe when you realize what these people are actually all about. They're still cleaning up Madame Curie's laboratory over 100 years later in France. They still haven't got that laboratory cleaned up. And the nuclear industry, the A-10 Warthog, for instance, is one of many weapons of mass destruction. They only fire depleted uranium munitions, dirty bombs. Every bullet is a dirty bomb. And they can fire 1.5 tons of dirty bombs every minute, sustained. And they don't fly by a single plane. There's many of these planes. You're in so much danger, it's hard to believe that you can live your whole life and sleepwalk through life and not understand what's going on. It's very well orchestrated. When you hear atoms for humanity, there's your atoms for humanity. All it fires is dirty bombs. The push is back in the media again today for dirty small reactors. This incredible fable they have spun about small modular reactors that don't exist. And according to international energy agencies, renewables in the next 4 years, by 2026, of new online, that'll come online, new energy, is equal to 4,800 gigawatts of new energy of just renewables will be online in the next 4 years. That's more energy than all current reactors worldwide and all fossil fuel plants worldwide, like gas and oil plants. So gas, oil, and nuclear plants worldwide, there'll be more renewable in just 4 years' time than there is total worldwide. And so there's this desperation in this nuclear industry to find another niche. And because these are parasites, they're very good at finding their niches. These are parasites. All of humanity should be amassing armies to destroy the nuclear industry, the nuclear lobbyists, the pro-nuclear institutions. These are your real enemies. These are your mortal enemies. They are destroying everybody's future. And they are completely out of control. And they revel in the destruction and the deception. Supreme Court today hears arguments on the state law to help ill Hanford workers. Ill Hanford workers. There's over 100,000 of them, by the way, that are ill. Now, that story is what's going on is they're appealing a law. This was the original story coming up here, right here. Feds double down on ill Hanford workers' court rulings, and they will appeal. The new law has no statute of limitations. And this story was from 2019. And so basically they said to qualify for compensation if you worked at Hanford 585 square mile nuclear wasteland, workers would only need to be employed one single day, a single 8-hour shift, and you could be entitled to a pension for the rest of your life. Or your loved ones could be entitled to compensation because you got sick and died from working there for 8 hours. And the industry will fight tooth and nail to deny the victims. They'll pull out every trick in their extensive book to deny the victims any kind of relief. So this is a death cult. This is not an industry. This is the definition of evil and danger. We are in real danger. You are in real danger. I try my best to educate those who are willing to listen and to rally those who are awake to stand tall and stoic and lash back out with evidence and documentation to stem the extinction of our planet, our only planet, our precious planet. We don't have an alternative. This is the 8 million species and humanity's planet. We are being exterminated by a monolithic, despicable, disgusting, filthy, evil, hideous, monstrous industry known as nuclear. Supreme Court hears the arguments, and so it's hard to make sense of that story. But that's what's really going on today with the story. But the nuclear industry is doing everything it can to deny the victims any relief. We should all hang our head in shame that they exist. There's the real story if you want to look it up and read it. If you work 8 hours, and they're appealing that today to try to stop the victims from finding peace. The Hanford Site where nuclear pollution began and still reigns. You might be interested in that story. I'll give you some excerpts of it. People must understand that should the Philippines nuclear power plant, the Batan, be activated, its waste will be impossible to get rid of and will permanently harm the environment. The following is the 30th in a series of excerpts from Dr. Kelvin Rodolfo's ongoing book project, Tilting at the Monster Among Rogue. Forays against the Batan nuclear power plant and the global nuclear energy. Hanford is the first and the worst toxic nuclear waste dump in the United States and possibly the world, although we don't know what Russia might be hiding, which is it's true because Mayak is just one of their facilities, and the legacy of Mayak is just terrifying what it's got done to our planet. Hanford is 586 square miles, but 1,500 square kilometers of desert in Washington State. And after World War II, the facility was expanded to 9 reactors and 5 reprocessing complexes. So this is 100% a death machine. The releases into the environment are stunning because you can't. 5 reprocessing complexes where they're harvesting enriched uranium plutonium for bombs. The byproduct that is constant releases, and the releases is hard to quantify, but it's absurdness how much has been released into the environment. It sits on the west bank of the Columbian River. Running the reactors require a huge amount of energy, and all reactors are not carbon-free. They're actually ran by 2 independent, full-size power plants, gas, oil, or coal. They are dedicated to the nuclear site to build it, to run it, and for 100 years to decommission it. So when they call nuclear carbon-free, those people, by right, shouldn't have a tooth left in their head after they say it. In the real world, a crowd of people would beat the shit out of these people every time they called it carbon-free. The reactors generated great amounts of waste heat and had to be kept cool. And this is on the Columbia River, so it sucked. Can you imagine 9 reactors and 5 reprocessing plants, how much water they had to use? And I'll explain to you, a typical reactor needs 1 million gallons per minute. So 9 million gallons per minute plus 5 reprocessing facilities. It's actually so evil it defies any kind of rationale. And it spewed that hot water back into the river where it flows 200 miles down to the Pacific Ocean. And so all those communities on the Columbian River everybody in those communities should also be entitled to lifetime pensions and free medical care for what's being done to them and their loved ones over the last 70 odd years. In fact, 30 miles, 50 kilometers downstream, the water from the plant was still warm. And little attention was paid to how it might affect the river life. No attention was paid. And the attention that was paid was the cover story by academics and scientists and journalists who understood there was a job there to lie to the population so they can make a paycheck and pretend to their families that they're good people when they know they're the farthest thing from good people. They're actually the type of people that if the truth came out, they'll murder their family so their family doesn't have to live in shame. They won't commit suicide themselves, but they'll happily murder their own family so they don't have to look them in the eyes when the truth comes out. That's what a nuclear expert actually is like. That's the genetic makeup of these people. They're the definition of cowardness, the definition of monsters is nuclear, pro-nuclear. It's really stunning that they got away with this for all this time. It's really stunning that we're the only operation on the planet that is trying to have a conversation. We have a poll tonight. Hi, everybody. The poll tonight: should the pro-nuclear organizations and universities be charged with omnicide? And omnicide is the extermination of all species. But most people are familiar with the word genocide, so I put that in there also. How radioactive substances affects health and environment was not understood back in the early years. And a Curie is how much radiation, how fast a gram of radium emits it. 37 billion emissions per second. But that's not true. So a gram of cesium is 110 Curies. And a Curie is typically 37 billion times many billions of atoms, of physical atoms. And a single atom can make you sick in increments over years once it sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones. Let's just go with that number. Hanford officially dumped over 110 million Curies into the Columbia River in just one go, which is almost 3,000 pounds of fission products. It's a stunning amount, by the way, but it's nowhere near the real tally. A whale cut off the Oregon coast in 1960 was emitting gamma rays because it had fed on plankton contaminated by Hanford, or from nuclear ocean bombs that were tested also, or from the dumping that they'd done in the ocean for decades from many, many different countries. It's just astounding how insidious and revolting and dangerous this industry actually is, and how many facets of it has been used to poison the ecosystem, the biosphere. It's astounding. It's humiliating that they exist. It's humiliating that your universities are the ones that created them. It's your universities that are the school of mass destructions. And 110 million Curies is almost 3,000 pounds of fission atoms. The number you're talking about, and that, so 3,000 pounds of fission atoms is more atoms than all the stars in the universe, in our known visible universe. 100 pounds is more dangerous atoms than all the grains of sands and all the beaches on the planet and the deserts. It's a genocide machine. And the world has to get up and make a stand. You have no future. Your time is running out. All the species are dying off because of the accelerated releases from Fukushima has caused a catastrophic event to happen, and we have documented that over 11 years. Authorities didn't pay any attention, not much attention, but any attention to huge quantities of radioactive gases Hanford releases from 1944 to 1972 included 725,000 curies of radioactive iodine-131. It's 100 times that minimum, 1,000 times that minimum. From 1944 to 1957. It goes into thyroid glands of the insects, the animals, the birds, the humans, the mammals, and is converted into radioactive hormones, which are immediately distributed out to all your vital organs and functions throughout your body, through all your glands and the insects and animals and birds. About 350,000 or about 30,000 times as much as 3 Mile Island nuclear accident admitted in 1979. And then the type of thyroid cancer, but there's actually 1,800 illnesses and diseases, not just cancer. There's heart problems and liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline. If you were to do studies on those illnesses within 100 miles of a nuclear power plant or a nuclear dump site or a nuclear holding site, anywhere on the planet you would see an absurd, unbelievable skyrocketing compared to non-nuclear environments. By 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, and their legacy, Riva Bay, for instance, where they just left all the fuel rods from nuclear submarines in outdoor pools with no covers or nothing. It's just the whole industry's, it reeks of just evilness. Every facet of this industry reeks of insidious cowards, unbelievable, unmitigated evilness. Hanford had processed 97,000 tons of uranium to make the plutonium for 2/3 of the 60,000 U.S. nuclear weapons. Remarkably, that was only 67 tons of plutonium, and dwarfs by a huge amount of waste produced. The nuclear meltdowns in Japan, the strontium-90, for instance, which is a bone seeker for all species, and that's a nasty, death-inducing, man-made anthropogenic element, didn't peak for the first 1,000 days. So you had a meltdown in 2011, but it was late 2014 before the strontium-90 started to peak, and that will continue for tens of thousands of days. So there's all these weird facets that make it evil, and the industry is quite aware of it. They revel in it. They despise us for some reasons. They despise the insects, the birds, the animals, the whales, all species, in particular humans. They despise us. And we know this is true because of the lies they tell in every single story published in every single media worldwide every single day. That we cover the best we can for many years. It's an overwhelming job for just a single person like me. By rights, I should have at least 5 or 10 people helping me. And we still couldn't keep up with it. And you would have to do a 15-hour show a day, basically, just to tell the 24-hour cycle each day. But you would need 5 or 10 people to help you pull that off. And it would be chaos each day. You'd need a budget of at least $15,000 to $20,000 a day to counter, or just to identify the propaganda and lies in a 24-hour cycle. More than 700,000 cubic meters of solid waste, contaminated clothing, tools, broken equipment were buried at the site and scattered haphazardly, randomly, across the desert, a 585 square mile site of just nuclear waste. They have actually 40 miles of unlined trenches in Hanford. The community Hanford, it's illegal to have unlined trenches at the dump. But you got to have unlined trenches because if you pour all this nuclear waste in there, the heavy metals will gather up and start a chain reaction. You have a nuclear meltdown. Earlier burials were unmarked and unrecorded. And so belated efforts to deal with the waste properly have been difficult, and the waste contains enough plutonium to make at least 1,800 bombs the size of the Fat Man. This waste is still splitting the atoms, still prolifically producing atoms. It's a perpetual atom production machine. These atoms are released into the environment perpetually, and they float around the planet looking for victims. And the victims are anything with replicating cells because nothing on the planet has an autoimmune trigger to deal with it. There's a shocking amount of documentation of them just dumping it in the pits and burying it. Every time it rains and snows, the water goes through it and washes it down into the water table, distributes it. Everything flows downhill to the Columbia River. And Columbia River eventually runs down through all kinds of major cities and communities. And it's a natural habitat on top of that for all kinds of salmon and rainbow trouts and frogs and insects. But then it ends up into the Pacific Ocean. Of even greater concern is how the site disposed of millions of cubic meters of liquid radioactive waste at Hanford. Hundreds of thousands of cubic meters were injected directly into the ground through wells. They dug wells and just poured the they've done the same thing in Donneray, right? And poured it, and Donneray claimed you can't get back there for 300 years. But nobody will be here in 300 years to find out if that's true. Were injected directly into the ground. Or were buried in trenches and drums. All of this for weapons you can't use. To use it is the end of life itself immediately instead of in the near future because of the byproduct. And our pleas fall on deaf ears throughout the universities, the academic, the government agencies worldwide. To be rational and to practice what they preach. They preach that everything is contained when nothing is contained. They preach that they got it under control when nothing is under control. They preach that they are qualified for the job when they're the least qualified for the job. And they preach that they're trying to do the best when they're not even attempting to do anything. They should be removed from their post and people with the will and the education put in positions to make things happen. That makes common sense, I would hope. But I don't think common sense exists anymore, does it? I've lost faith in humanity on top of that. In addition, more than 200,000 cubic meters of high-level liquids and solid radioactive waste originally stored in 177 single-walled tanks. It was starting in 1943. And this stuff, they knew what was going to happen. They buried the tanks in the ground to stop the gamma shine from killing everybody walking past it. They filled this up, allegedly. I don't really believe that. Because if you fill up a tank with the kind of stuff we're talking about, it starts a chain reaction, burns a hole through the tank, and which is what happened apparently, allegedly. And the tanks will empty themselves into the environment. And there's zero possibility they didn't know it was going to happen. There's zero possibilities that the academics and the scientists and the nuclear corporations didn't know what was going to happen. It's zero possibilities. Currently, there's over 11,000 victims work there. All of them will get sick. Their children will get sick. Everybody that uses those washing machines at their homes will end up getting sick. The left panel below shows some of them being constructed around 1944. They were designed to last 20 years. Because they would move on, got a pension. Somebody else will come along, won't even know what's what. But started leaking much sooner in 1958. Despite that, surprisingly, the site's managers continued to build them until 1964. Nothing surprising when it comes to nuclear. In 1968, the U.S. Department of Energy started building 28 new double shell tanks, which are these right here. In 2011, a liquid from 149 old tanks began to be transferred to the new ones. Remember that? That was when Fukushima happened, right? You can't transfer the liquid because the hoses, the pipes, the equipment, you can't get near it again. You physically can't go near it. It's a lethal dose once you start. The pipes need to be 4 feet thick lead to protect the workers. And if you took a square foot of those pipes today, if they did do it, brought it to a subway, everybody that walks past it for 1 million years would die that day. By 1989, water had leaked into 68 of the old tanks, and bearing much toxic radiation was leaking back out and into the ground. 2012, the Department of Energy, which is the Department of Scumbags, found half the new tanks were leaking. The tanks weren't filled up in the first place. This was the cover story. Right? A couple of years later, we'll say, oh, well, they're leaking. That's why the future generation will say, well, there's nothing in the tank. And they say, well, yeah, because there was a leak. We told you about it in 2012 when they didn't even transfer it in the first place. For almost half a century, hideous military securities made it easy for Hanford's managers to insist that any leakage from the tanks would be insignificant and easily absorbed into the soil, even though it knew about the problem in 1989. And it seems that the department never studied the problem properly simply because it didn't want to know. And since then, it spent billions of dollars struggling unsuccessfully to solve it. And the radioactive pollutants in Hanford's groundwater included uranium, technetium-99, tritium, strontium, americium, neptunium, cesiums, 1,000 fission products that we know about. And allegedly the military has classified around 12,000 isotopes worldwide. There's no such thing as tritium from a nuclear reactor, by the way. It's tritium-3H. As we saw in our last foray, tritium, which is 3H, man-made, which is the same stuff to use, by the way, to double the capacity of a nuclear bomb. If you inhale it, eat it, drink it, or absorb it through your skin, or otherwise emits beta particles inside you that will cause cancers. And again, you see these connotations of the word cancer, because that's the game, right? I'm not saying he's playing the game. He's fell into that trap, obviously. But there's 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. It's not just cancer. Strontium-90 substitutes for calcium in the bones and the marrow and mutates the stem cells and causes leukemia and cancer in the bones and surrounding tissues. Well, what it does is it compromises your immune system immediately. Makes you more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally benign and innocuous and harmless. Iodine-129 is soluble in water with a 15.5 million year half-life, so there's 10 half-lives. What's a half-life supposed to be? It's just half, right? There's 10 half-lives. But even when it finally decays down to just radioactive lead, it's still a man-made anthropogenic. It's still dangerous. It still destroys the chromosomes, the DNA, for long past the human experience on this planet, which is limited now thanks to this creepy, despicable, disgusting, vicious, heartless, soulless, coward industry known as nuclear. So it moves easily through the environment. Its half-life of almost 16 million years means it will pollute Hanford and the entire biosphere forever. What is the final solution for the 56 million gallons of radioactive waste that doesn't exist anymore, has leached into the ground and the Colombian River? It's 212,000 cubic meters. Imagine 212,000 one-ton pickup trucks. In 1989, they planned to mix it with boron and other materials and melt it, which was a fable, of course. And once you built the facility, you can never go inside of it after. Melt it by heating it to 1150 degrees Celsius, 2100 degrees Fahrenheit, and store it as glass in stainless steel barrels underground. And after many years, in 2002, they finally began constructing the Hanford waste treatment and a mobilization plant. But many technical issues and delays kept postponing its starting date. It is now in danger of not meeting a court-imposed deadline of 2023. A court-imposed deadline to start operation. And costs have ballooned to $17 billion, which is nothing when it comes to Hanford, is it? In 2019, the estimated total cost of the Hanford Site cleanup was $242 billion. In February 2022, it had risen to $340 billion to $600 billion. And they say most of the cleanup will be done by 2078, in 56 years. If 11,000 people are there every day. For something that you can't even use. For bombs you can't actually use. And a lot of the people responsible for it are still alive today. They should be taken and publicly hung. Kicking and screaming and shitting in their pants. That would be justice. I don't give a fuck what their age is. They should be taken and hung, the people that done this. U.S. used more wind power than coal or nuclear for the first time. For the first time ever, the amount of wind power produced in one day eclipsed nuclear and coal energy in the United States. We have to stop being afraid of nuclear, says an opinion. Full of lies and deception and misrepresentation and deceit and dishonesty. Amazed me that our disproportionate fear of nuclear power prevents us from energetically promoting it as an important part of weaning ourselves from fossil fuel. The best example of the hysteria associated with nuclear power is the public response to the Fukushima disaster in Japan. Hysteria. Hysteria. This is a radioactive fallout model based on 20 days only. It's not based on the lost inventories. It's based on venting from a single building, which couldn't have been done because there was no power for 680 kilometers in Japan. The radioactive fallout, of course, after another 10 or 20 days, the model covers the rest of the planet. Gas, oil, and coal doesn't make plumes, or their emissions don't make plumes that cover the planet. And these plumes, they pulse energy at the speed of light every second. Almost the speed of light, almost 186,000 miles per second. These are death factories. Here's a professor from British Columbia, Canada. He's going to try to convince you sleeping next to a human for 8 hours is a bigger dose than living next door to a nuclear power station. That's just one of the many propagandas lies you see there.
And living next to a nuclear power station can actually contribute less than your loved one when it comes to... with myself as one of the principal investigators, was awarded $6 million.
Now, that's each year he gets that $6 million. Now, the next question you got to ask yourself is, how did everybody know to laugh? Watch this again.
Living next to a nuclear power station can actually contribute less than your loved one when it comes to...
So how did everybody know to laugh? That's Chris Sarkozy. A despicable, disgusting, subhuman species on our planet, this creature is. But how did the whole audience know to laugh to that? Because that's a lie, right? What he said. But he wasn't saying this is a lie, have a few laughs for yourselves. He was portraying it. That was a presentation from Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, Canada, for the population. Trying to convince the population that radiation was harmless. He equated man-made anthropogenic radiation with cosmic radiation, with just normal, stupid, harmless, everyday background emitters. We had one guy was comparing it to peanut butter. Another guy was comparing it to being in a kayak for 15 minutes. And another one compared it to driving for 600 miles. These are absurdness. But these were academics. This is absurdness to suggest any of that has any relationship whatsoever to man-made radiation. You can't conflate. The earthquake and tsunami that caused the disaster killed thousands. The ensuing nuclear problems killed only one. What do we focus on? First off, that's heartbreaking that somebody would say there's only one person injured, but that's the entire nuclear industry will try to convince you that. Does the truth matter to anybody in positions of authority anywhere on this planet? I doubt it. The Japan National Cancer Center said the number of patients rose by an extra 865,000 in just 1 year in Japan. There's one street in Fukushima by 2012, 7 people dropped dead on the street in less than 1 year. There's one community city where over 12,700 people died of heart attacks, extra a spike, an abnormality, in just 1 month. Do you think it's just 1 month that happened? Do you think it's just one city? You think peanut butter caused that? Nuclear waste could be a treasure. It's not trash, said Trashman. Less than 1% of the potential energy uranium is used to produce power in a nuclear reactor, which is James Hansen's quote from yesterday, right? However, it has the potential to produce prodigious amounts of energy in what is called a breeder reactor, which is what I brought up in the last 2 episodes, the last 2 presentations. We talked about the breeder reactors. And lo and behold, today they're talking about a breeder reactor without requiring any further uranium mined. What they're talking about is they can harvest the atoms, the splitting of the atoms are physical atoms. They can harvest them and make fuel for other reactors. So a single reactor core is perpetually producing physical atoms that are released. So when you put the same fuel, when you put it in a fuel pool, it's perpetually producing atoms that are released. Which is why they are building and have, most nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. This is a new one in the United Kingdom. The idea is a lot of atoms will fall close by, ends up in the food goes to market, keeps the background levels down and poisons you. That's not an accident. That's an agenda. That's what they do. It's a big joke, like a banana and a potato chip, and sleeping next to somebody is the joke when they can call it a comparison of radiation. Do you think all of these nuclear power plants were built in farmland by accident? Because if you do, you really need to go study this subject, because you're wrong. It's done on purpose. They hate us. They hate you. They hate your children, your friends, your families, your loved ones. They hate all the species. And this is not a conjecture or an opinion. This is an absolute fact. This is a quantifiable fact. However, it has the potential to produce prodigious amount of energy in what is called a breeder reactor. Unfortunately, no commercial viable breeder reactor has ever been built. They're trying. A reactor can provide a twofer, disposing of what is now considered problematic waste. You can't dispose of it because it's nuclear. You can't destroy it. You can't incinerate it. You can't destroy it by putting it in acid, which, by the way, how they reprocess it. They boil it in an acid at 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. You can't destroy it. While producing a very large amount of energy for centuries, the government and private companies have spent billions trying to improve conventional reactors and to develop fusion reactors while ignoring the potential of a breeder reactor, which I happened to bring up 2 days in a row. Yesterday and the days before shows. This is the third time in a row we talked about this specifically. A breeder reactor physically, the nuclear fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into your community, into the ecosystem, the biosphere, 24/7. It's really something. Carl E. Nash, I 100% unequivocally disrespect you, you demonic, sadistic, filthy, common, everyday liar, you. In the comments section, coal burning actually spews more radiation in the atmosphere than nuclear power. Now, I've seen that comment thousands of times over the years. It still shocks me that people would say something like that. But they're not actually people, are they? They're the industry. It's hard to say that the people in the nuclear industry are humans. I can't quantify that assertion that they're humans. I can't say, well, yeah, that's a human. They look like humans. They drive vehicles and they wear clothing and they eat food, but they don't have the human experience, do they? They hate humans. And they hate all species. Research and development of breeder reactor technology begs for funding. No, you begs for funding. You rotten, two-faced trash. You human trash. You revolting, disgusting, despicable piece of trash, you. You're revolting, sir. The largest accidental release of radioactive material in U.S. history. What happened at Church Rock? It was a tragedy, but it's not the largest accidental release of radioactive material. That was Santa Susana, which is actually, I would have to say it's Hanford, or Los Alamos. But Santa Susana was 460 times worse than 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island radiated around 2 million people. So 2 million times 460 was Santa Susana. They actually covered Santa Susana up for over 55 years before that became public knowledge. And we covered this story before. This is a terrible story. What happened at the Church Rock, which was the Navajo, where they have 15,000 abandoned uranium mines currently. In the early hours of July the 16th, 1979, 94 million gallons of radioactive liquid cascaded into the environment and polluted the Navajos' drinking water, their cattle water, their farmlands, and they never had no other water source. And even today, that legacy of debilitating and hereditary illnesses and congenital malformations with the children is still prolific. That's the problem, though, when it comes to nuclear. It's not capable of doing good. The fact that they use chemotherapy in hospitals, anybody who understands the significance of that genocide can appreciate that they have captured the regulatory agencies, have captured the universities, have captured the medias worldwide, has weaponized it against us. It's not an accident what they're doing. It's not. The extinction, extermination of all species and humanity is not an accident. This is an agenda. Yeah, what they've done to the Navajos, their entire legacy is insane. But they knew that this was going to break. They were warned that it was breaks in the dam and that the tailings, these tailing ponds were chemicals. This is 94 million gallons of chemicals / radiation. They couldn't care less on top of that. The nuclear industry celebrates it probably every year, has macabre parties, no doubt, celebrate the misery and agony and heartbreak. And they claim there's no deaths recorded as a direct result of the spill, and many locals cite it as a source of ailments affecting them like cancers and kidney diseases and diabetes, which is just a fraction of the illnesses you're going to get from this stuff. It's a terrifying story. Everybody should be reading it. Mitsubishi. You disgusting Mitsubishi. Nuclear reactor-on-a-truck fables. It never stops with these, does it? Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries intend to build and commercialize nuclear reactors. Now, we've been listening to this fable for a decade straight. It never stops, and they never produce it either, on top of that. There's no intention of producing it. The idea is they don't want you to produce any kind of renewable energies. They just want the planet to suffocate and die, including themselves. They're so arrogant that they actually think that they're immune. To call it low carbon, non-carbon emitting energy, and that's their fable right there. Again, these are fables. In the next 4 years, renewables is going to be the animosity equivalent of new energy online of 5,500 full-size nuclear power plants and renewables will be online. What we see now is the industry is doing the drowning man, where they'll take everything and everybody down with them. That's all we're seeing. A carbon-free source of energy. To call nuclear a carbon-free source of energy, again, we've seen this picture 100 times in the last couple of years. So it's just designed to get government to throw more money at something that can't exist. You see this picture here where the container doesn't even touch the back of the truck. Once reviled, nuclear power is now looking good to environmentalists. This is another story of, there's a word for it, and I'm not going to say it online because, well, it's Machiavellian, really. As the Earth warms, which is Fukushima, which is nuclear. Nuclear is global warming, right? You covered the whole planet in an invisible plume, a plume. If it was a snowstorm covering the whole planet, you would get it, see? But because it's invisible and you can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or touch it or feel it or pick it up, it's like it doesn't exist to the average person. But it's pulsing energy every second at the speed of light. And I've actually had the commenters from the industry show up and say, yeah, but it's not producing heat. You can't make something. Try making something that pulses energy at the speed of light and tell me it doesn't produce any energy. And it does it every second for millions of years. This is ludicrous assertions. But it has another brutal side effect, is it kills the bacteria in the ecosystem, and nothing can live without bacteria. It immediately starts annihilating and sterilizing the microscopic insects. It makes the birds' eggs so fragile they can't hold up to breeding. It's genocide. It's the perfect genocide machine. And the industry knows it. The industry has no illusions about it. They're hard at it. They want to do it in increments, and they've done it in a way where there's no way out. Because they control the system that could help stop it. As the Earth warms at a daunting pace because of, if you look back, you'll see this is all started after Fukushima. The war in Ukraine sends gas and oil prices skyrocketing. Well, no. The countries, the NATO countries and the United Nations countries, the illegal United Nations countries, have cut off Russia and by proxy now caused inflation in their countries. That wasn't an accident. That's on purpose. Nuclear power is starting to look a little like a much more appealing option. So, and we've covered that in the last month, how immediately nuclear was put on a pedestal because of the war in Russia and Ukraine, which makes no sense because Russia, first spot I went to was Chernobyl. The nuclear industry, and by proxy then the universities and your medias, rallied then to create what we're looking at now. Even some passionate anti-nuclear activists have come around. And now view the dangers of fossil fuel as much more worrisome than the issues related to nuclear power, says the Scumbag. The worldwide trend was apparent last week when South Korea, which has been heavily dependent on fossil fuel, reversed plans to phase out the nuclear plant. Oh, that didn't happen to have something to do with a new president being elected, did it? Oh, that's right, it did. This person uses so many strawmans in this article, I can't possibly cover them all. In the U.S., the sign of changing attitude was the White House committed to spend a lousy $6 billion for nuclear power plants. Nuclear power plants. $6 billion for 100 nuclear power plants. It's just madness. Well, it's not 100, so this is madness. So let's say there's 70 plants that they're going to spend the money on. That's $82,000 a plant. $85,000 a plant. Did I even do that right? Let's try that again. Seems weird. 6 billion, Dana. I must have put in 6 million, did I? Yeah, 6 billion. Divided by 70. 828. $85 million. Which means you can't do nothing. A nuclear power plant can't do jack with $85 million. It has to pay an engineering firm at least $40 million to draw up the plans to do something. It'll take at least 3 years to finalize the plans. Then you got to get every material you're using has to be triply inspected independently. It has to be the best grade available on the entire planet. The list just keeps going. And hopes the nuclear might cut back on carbon emissions, this is spawned from the 2015 Paris Accord. And if you look at where France gets its uranium from Niger, where it caused a civil war for over 60 years, destroyed the country and neighboring countries, impoverished the country so it gets its hands on cheap uranium, right? If you look at what France also done to the French Polynesians and the Sahara Desert with their nuclear bomb testing, it's just astounding. The entire legacy of the nuclear industry is nothing but incredibly, endless, hideously misery machine. Still going full speed today on top of that. Nothing else is allowed to matter, only nuclear. Because they captured the universities, they captured your media, they captured key positions in your government, and they captured your regulatory agencies. Another single, uranium stocks have been surging. It was artificially inflated. That started last year with Sprout Industries. It was created to buy the physical uranium yellow cake and create an artificial demand that couldn't sustain itself. And we've seen them, like Globe and Mail, when Fukushima melted down, for 10 years straight, the Globe and Mail pumped uranium stocks every week, telling people that they're going up when they were actually flatlined, and robbed millions of people of their pensions. Got a poll tonight. Should universities, pro-nuclear organizations, be charged with genocide and omnicide? And of course they should. And they should be given the death sentence for it too. We'd have no future if we don't address this. We have no future. Nobody does. Your children do not have a future if you do not address this. Doesn't matter how much money you have. Doesn't matter how much of a celebrity you are. It doesn't matter how great of a musician or a sportsman or an actor you are. You are not immune. Your children are not immune from what's happening. You do not have a future because of this. Such as stronger storms, which is caused by Fukushima. If you go back and look, since 2011, we've had almost every hurricane, typhoon, and cyclone has hit land at over 180, 200 miles per hour winds, up to 255 mile per hour winds, up to 300 mile per hour winds in some places. We don't have infrastructure anywhere on the planet that builds houses and buildings that can handle sustained winds that we're seeing. We never had it before. These are post-Fukushima winds. The crop failures and the heat exhaustion is caused because you kill the bacteria in the forests with the radioactive fallout. And the fields are the same thing, where you kill the bacteria in the soil. Therefore, the roots can't survive and do the job. They need the bacteria. Non-profit environmental organizations, which I have learned to now detest and despise and to hate with an absolute passion. Non-profit environmental organization, even if you do start one up in good faith, is somebody else, the industry will take it over at some point. And it'll be used, weaponized to destroy everything you've ever tried to accomplish. Vine has seen anti-nuclear activists switch sides. And he's a despicable person. He points to Carol Browner. Really? A single person? An environmentalist and former U.S. Environmental Protection Agency administrator. You can't be an environmentalist and a U.S. Environmental Protection Agency administrator. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agencies are not good people. They're not. They're part of the industry. Their job is to promote nuclear. Who now sees nuclear power as a better choice for the environment than fossil fuel. One early to switch was Stuart Brand, the creator of the counterculture classic Whole Earth catalog. He said, I'm so pro-nuclear now I'd be in favor of it even if climate change and greenhouse gases were not an issue. And that was 2010 quote. Why you gone all the way back to 2010 for? The year before Fukushima, by the way. It's not just activists who have come to see nuclear power differently. Pew Research Center. Of course, the Pew Research surveys are just garbage, aren't they? They really are. If you want a pro-nuclear, they'll just poll the pro-nuclear university students. In March, found that 35% of Americans felt the government should encourage the production of nuclear power. They just make it up as they go along. There's no checks and balances. There's no incentive not to be evil. 37% were neutral. Really? The majority of the population thinks nuclear is like bananas and potato chips and walking in the sunshine and getting on an airplane or sleeping next to somebody because of the endless, relentless propaganda. And only 26% wanted the government to discourage nuclear energy. Just a year earlier, 47% of Americans were opposed to expanding nuclear power. So what caused such an incredible discrepancy in just one single year? Endless propaganda. The number of Americans who are pro-nuclear power may have even grown after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. After Russia invaded Chernobyl and allegedly attacked another nuclear power plant, made people pro-nuclear, did it? Given the impact the war has on oil and gas prices. What a disgusting, despicable industry nuclear is. What a revolting, soulless, spineless industry nuclear is. What a bizarre bunch of freaks nuclear industry actually is. You know, the 2,000 nuclear students in Taiwan, when Fukushima melted down, were tasked with going online and challenging anybody's assertions that nuclear was bad. 2,000 nuclear students attacked the internet for several years. The war in Ukraine has brought into sharper focus the need to get off fossil fuel. What the hell are you talking about? It goes for individuals and nations. Nuclear power has a very good safety record, with the exception of a few highly publicized incidences like Fukushima, but it's not unlike air disasters. Like, we've heard that argument before. Well, cars crash and planes crash. We don't get rid of them. And the argument for that is really straightforward. It's hard to believe that people like that actually exist, but that's the nuclear industry. This is a model, and an accurate model I might add, of a 16-day plume model from Fukushima. In less than 16 days, when the model stops, that's 16 days later, covers the entire planet in radioactive fallout. Airplanes don't do that. You sack of shit. You despicable sack of shit, you. You revolting, despicable, disgusting parasite, you. You horrendous, horrific, subhuman creature, you. I think nuclear power is a lot safer than it was in 2011. Good for you. But you're actually wrong. You twisted and sadistic, perpetual lying machine. He said, in fact, the fuel assemblies can now be fabricated to allow plant operators far more time to react to loss of power and help avoid accidents. No, the zirconium cladding was manufactured to try to give the plants a few more minutes. And I think it's like 10 to 20 minutes is what they were able to accomplish before the cladding started melting down. Once the cladding melts down, it catches uranium, plutonium pellets inside of it, will start to burn also. And that's now classified as a nuclear meltdown at that stage. It gives you 10 to 20 minutes. That was it, which is not enough. It was just meant to be used in stories like this. They never actually done it. And 10 minutes ain't going to stop a nuclear meltdown when you have an event. You're a parasite, sir. Another innovation to design small modular reactors can be manufactured in factories and assembled on site, he adds. They don't even exist. There's no factories. There's no groundbreaking for factories. There's no assembly lines. It's a complete fabrication. Currently, individual plants managing their own radioactive waste. They don't have a repository anywhere on the entire planet. Vine? What a disgusting parasite you are. What a horrific, despicable parasite you turned out to be. Your parents should be arrested for not drowning you in a bucket of vomit. The spent fuel rods are stored on site at nuclear power plants. Initially in specially designed pools. Each pool is boiling off about 120,000 liters a day. Each liter is trillions of atoms that a breeder reactor would hope to harvest to turn into physical fuel rods. But that doesn't exist. That technology doesn't exist, thank goodness. On the other hand, those atoms are boiled off into the environment with no containment each day and released into the environment where they hunt down life on this planet and destroy it in increments over millions of years. It's a misery machine that'll never go away. Plans to turn Yucca Mountain into Nevada into a national repository were abandoned by the federal government after strong local opposition. Again, another lie. First off, there was $20 billion on litigation. Second off, the reason Yucca Mountain doesn't exist was because the mountain was calculated to how much heat could it store for 200 years. and it didn't meet the criteria. On top of that, it was built, the Yucca Mountain is on a earthquake fault line. That's why it was abandoned. Now, and recently they discovered it had a major earthquake very close to it, and another fault line was discovered. Can you actually open your mouth up without lying, Vine? I'd like to stick my foot down your throat, I really would. As time goes on, there will be increasing numbers of electric vehicles. Vine said. Renewables like wind and solar will help fill the void, but they won't be enough. If you used wind and solar, back it up with geothermal, tidal power, and wave energy, back that up with pumped hydro storage and compressed air storage, 6 of them, 7 of them, you're independent till the end of time, which is not that far away thanks to the nuclear industry, is it? Montana baseload power may require nuclear energy. Again, lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. And if Montana was to use what I just told you, wind and solar backed up with thermal or geothermal energy, tidal energy, and wave energy, or back that up with pumped hydro compressed air, and many other renewable energy sources that are available, if they took one thousandth of the money they're blowing on nuclear small modular reactors and pipe dreams and actually put it in the renewables, they would come up with the solutions right away. If you really wanted to come up with the solutions, you take 1,000 universities and you solve the problems, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? Solar projects sometimes face lawsuit from radical environmentalists. No, they face lawsuits from the nuclear industry posing as environmentalists. Belgium nuclear exit would lead to more emissions, International Energy Agency. All nuclear power plants need a gas, oil, or coal plant, 2 of them, dedicated to it, to run the site, to run the pumps, 1 million gallons a minute of water for each reactor, to run the whole bloody city-sized site. If you got rid of the nuclear power plant, kept the pumps, pumped the water up the hill, and then the flow coming down the hill was used to generate electricity, problem solved, see? You don't even need to do that. You just have your gas and oil plants, get rid of the nuclear, use the gas and oil, the coal that is running the plant, and then have pumped hydro and compressed air storage. Nuclear has no right to exist. It only exists as a extermination machine, extinction machine. Belgium isn't doing enough to curb its greenhouse gas emissions. Now, this narrative has been shoved down the planet's throat through propaganda since 2015 with the French betrayal, also known as the Paris Accord. It's too much what they're doing. Kiro's consortium formed to help develop its reactor technology. So here's another prime example where you have, and this is from the World Nuclear News, so get your vomit buckets out. Bruce Power, Constellation, Bruce Power is Canada, by the way. Constellation Southern Company, Tennessee Valley authorities have joined it, Kiro's Power Operation Manufacturing Development Alliance. Not to develop real energy, renewable, sustainable energy, but more nuclear. And dirty nuclear at that. And pushing you these fake small modular reactor fables again. Because you don't need it. Renewables will conquer the planet in 4 years' time. There'll be more energy, new energy online in the next 4 years before a single small modular reactor could ever exist than 5,500 nuclear power plants. But the nuclear industry is too busy trying to steal every single resource, every single nickel that could be utilized to make the planet livable for some species that might survive the apocalypse of Fukushima, and to destroy it into this despicable, hateful, disgusting, genocidal, ecocidal nuclear fable. Israel's the world's 8th nuclear power. Well, there's only 9 of them. Demona. The Jewish state possesses 90 nuclear warheads and is threatening to use them on a number of occasions, I might add. The United Kingdom has 225 nuclear weapons. France has 290. Israel with 90. Pakistan with 165. India with 156. Russia with 6,250. China with 350. North Korea with 40 to 50. United States with 5,500. So North Korea is number 9 and Israel is number 8. Whoopee fucking do. This is where we left off last night, wasn't it? Right there. There's actually 150,000 sites originally in Japan. Up to 60 million of these 1-ton bags of radioactive waste, which they're cutting open and turning it into farmers' fields now, because everybody sits in silence, sucking their thumbs. And I guess we'll pick this up. Now tomorrow night is Thursday night. I'm trying to... I'm still busted up from the recent research expedition. I tore my inner thigh muscle. I stabbed it with a piece of steel metal on the trailer on the highway. I had to pull over and jump up on the trailer to secure the load of the quad and the trailer on top of the trailer. I was using ratchet straps, and one of the straps you got to get on the trailer. So I was on the Trans-Canada Highway with cars whipping past, and there was an opening. So I opened my door up and ran back and jumped up on the trailer. Well, I tried. As I went to jump on the trailer, the piece of steel, rusty steel sticking off the side of the trailer, tore through my jeans and stabbed me in the leg. And I got a bruise probably that big on the inner of my thigh, but I also punched a hole in there. And each time you sit on the toilet, that cut is going to be on the toilet seat. Let's put it that way. And so terrified it's going to get infected, right? But it's so sore. It's brutal. It's very difficult to do things. And I'm trying to get projects accomplished. And I'm struggling to try to, because we burnt through all of our resources in the last 2 weeks, including my pension, right? I destroyed my pension to help fund the research expedition, and then we raised some money to offset everything. Thank goodness. We couldn't have done it, obviously. And it'll be next week before my pension comes in, I can get back to normal, right? Which is fine. Next week is not far away because I work all day, every day at this stuff. Time flies, right? But I'm struggling right now to keep things together. And, you know, all these stories from the nuclear industry, they're gone bananas. And we've seen this over the last year or so, because we do this typically 5 days a week. We've been noticing over the last year or so this ratcheting up, this like panic mode of the nuclear industry. And the nuclear industry is basically trying to snuff out all the species and humanity on the planet. And they do that with what's known as the slow kill. They release so much radiation into the environment, it gets everybody and everything eventually. And this is what we see happening right now, is they've released so much radiation into the environment that they have jeopardized the future of all of humanity. And I mean the future, the near future. The catastrophic storms we're seeing and wildfires, but particularly the catastrophic storms, like the hurricanes and typhoons and cyclones we're seeing, are the animosity of F4 tornadoes, except they're 700-800 kilometers wide. And instead of coming ashore and losing energy, they don't. We've never seen anything like this in history. And this is due to this incredible, prolific amount of radiation released from destroyed reactors in Japan, which they even today have covered up dramatically. It's if you look at the beginning of my show last night, if you're not familiar with that subject, you'll see the reactors I'm talking about. If you go back to my first video on this site, because this is a new site, and my other site, when I was out counting spiders last year in the forest for extended periods, I was camping out, going across. We were 400 kilometers away from home in the forest, counting spiders. They took down my main site, which had 1,600 presentations and 24,200 subscribers. 24,200 subscribers gone in the blink of an eye, with no strikes, no emails, no warning. They just disappeared my site with 1,600 presentations on it. And all my research expeditions were on the site. And I had 24,200 subscribers for 4 years. I never got a single extra subscriber. I never lost a single subscriber for 4 years. What's the odds of that, I wonder? What's the odds of that? So that's it, I guess, for tonight. Because I'm an angry person when I read all this news today. It made me angry. We got a poll tonight. We're going to end the poll. Should pro-nuclear organizations and universities be charged with omnicide? And omnicide is the extermination of all species. Humans, flora, fauna, insects, animals, birds. And this is what is actually happening, right? We are watching the extermination. We have documented it on major expeditions that would last 4 to 5 months, doing species counts in the Pacific Ocean, for instance, for 6 years. And we have seen the extermination of that coastline. So that expedition, well, this is the recent one right here. This was last week. So how do I take... How the hell do I take this thing? A frozen, soaking bit down. That's the first morning, right? Everything's covered in a big sheet of ice. And then you're sleeping in a tent. That tent was amazing, right? I want to get back out. That tent actually works in cold weather. That's a 4-season tent. But we've done research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia, all the way to Alaska, year after year after year. And I use that boat each year. And again, this spring I'll be out there. I should be out there right now, but it costs quite a bit of money to me to get that back up and running. I really do need a new engine on that boat, because that engine's made 6 trips to Alaska, and it's not very reliable anymore. And so these research expeditions, you can fill the coastline up with people. But you are not going to find those species over there. Fukushima wiped that out. That was the some of the species for the Pacific Ocean that are now permanently gone. You'll never take the pictures to the left again. Fukushima has wiped out those species. They are permanently exterminated. That's one of the legacies of Fukushima. When I tell you Fukushima is an extinction event, I mean Fukushima is an extinction event. I don't mean maybe, I don't mean almost, I don't mean gonna be, I mean it's an extinction event. It has exterminated all the species to your left. These are before and after authentic pictures of the coastline of British Columbia all the way to Alaska. So you can't exterminate all these species there without exterminating Alaska's species too. That's a fact. We have destroyed the ocean, the super life itself. Can no longer produce species, as you can see. So you see birds and whales, but they don't exist in this. This ecosystem existed for millions of years. And that's what a typical day looked like on these research expeditions, yeah? That's what a typical day on these research expeditions looked like. Still have nightmares every time I look at that. We need to raise some money. We got way too much going on, and we can't fund it. The industry's done a good job of isolating me. We just had a mass die-off on this coastline of seabirds, 4 different species that we're able to identify. And of course that was downplayed dramatically, frighteningly by the medias who lied about it. We went out and done the research ourselves and discovered this is a catastrophic event. For the common murres, the turs, the small ox, which is the dove kites, and not just the thick-billed murres or turs, but also common turs. And these birds dive 600 feet all day, so if they can't find food, they had died of starvation because Fukushima has broken the food chain. So there's 2 links at the bottom of the description for people to donate. I'll show you that, physically show it to you. So that's the video we're on right now. If you go below the video in the description, if you go below way down to the bottom of the description, you see those 2 links at the very bottom. They are both to my directly, the only 2 ways you can donate to me. I don't have a Facebook account or anything like that. I just have this site and my nuclear site, the nuclearproctologist.org. If you go over there in particular, you can use your credit cards. The other one's for PayPal. And if you wait for the picture to load up, below the picture is a donate button. The first picture, that's the way you can donate to me. Or you can go to PayPal, Dana Durnford. That link is directly to my PayPal, so you can't make a mistake. Both of those are directly to me. And then every show, Google likes to turn off my sharing ability. Google loves to turn off my sharing ability. I'll show you what that means, hopefully. You gotta scroll all the way down so people can embed my video. And I can't scroll with this mouse. Look at that. Hang on. So allow embedding. So if you had a website and you wanted this video to play on your website, I have to make sure I click that button and save it after I go live, because Google disengages it when I goes live. We're going to end the poll with 41 votes. 95% of the people agree that the pro-nuclear organizations and pro-nuclear universities should be charged with genocide and omnicide. And that poll right there, let's end it. Don Vincent, good night everybody. Albert, Peaceware, she's Pam. Dana Nasana, thank you again, Dana, for moderating. It's appreciated. Richard, SCH, Stephen Young. Yeah, we need carbon. James Lucid, hey buddy. Jason, James called in last show. Port Angeles. Say goodnight to everybody. Try again tomorrow night. Colette S. Hi Colette. I hope everybody has a great night, great day tomorrow. Christopher. Scripture Nest, you're welcome. Warren. Darren. Richard. Good night, everybody. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night and great weekend. Or great day tomorrow. Weekend's not here yet. Yeah, looks like I got everybody. Good stuff. Well, tomorrow's coming at us again. There's a lot of work to do between now and then. We gotta have... The world needs at least one show like this out there pushing back. There should be hundreds and thousands of shows like mine kicking the shit out of the nuclear industry, yeah? Minimum, there should be thousands. And there will be, because we're not giving up. We're not going away. We're not going to be slowing down anytime soon. And we are not taking prisoners. We want to hold this industry accountable. Andrew B. Hi, Andrew. Timber Traveler. Yeah, thank you. Did I get everybody? I think I did. Good night, everybody. Take care. Thank you for finding the time and courage and the fortitude to show up and join us. They are censoring our numbers. There are many of us out there. And we are not going away. We are here to go to war for you, your friends, your families, your loved ones, and whatever remains of the 8 million species. It's our watch, and we take it serious, and we are not going to sit in silence. God bless, and good night, everybody. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody soon.